That's it. That's all I have.
Alright, y con esto y a la mera hora, yo creo que vamos empezando la sesión 250 y algo de Tesos en Wi-Fi. David García, ¿en qué número vamos, parcero? Acuérdame que me pierdo. ¿257? 56. Ahora te miro. 158. Versión 258. O como dirían mis amigos españoles, 258. ¿Qué dice David? ¿Bien o qué? ¿Cómo vas a guitarra?
Bien,
¿Cómo vas a escuchar?
Bien. Todo bien, hoy está conectado, haciendo dedo.
So, ya David de España, Marlon de Ecuador. ¿Cómo vamos, Marlon? Todavía tenemos una reunioncita pendiente ahí para hablar de SIDOS.
Hola, Ferney. Sí, así
sí.
es. Esta semana estuvo un poquito complicada, para la siguiente a ver si ya nos
Sí, esta semana tenemos que sacar tiempo. ¿Y Mario? ¿Qué dice Mario? Hasta de carretera nos sigue. ¿En qué andas? ¿En el Cybertruck?
No, ando con un Tesla que maneja solo, entonces puedo hacer el giri. Full self-driving en Texas, se puede.
Ah, bueno, listo. ¿Qué dice Rubén? Español en México.
¿Cómo estás?
Bien. Y Luis, ¿qué dice? Dominicano en Miami, en Florida. ¿Dónde está? En Sarasota, ¿no?
Sarasota, sí, Miami.
Más para el norte. Ah, bueno. ¿Y Manuelito qué dice? Español en España. Joder. ¿Todo bien? ¿Tranquilo? No, hoy ya perdió la voz completamente, Manuelito. No, el llenado no está diciendo nada. ¿Qué dice Francisco?
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo están?
Bien. Entonces hoy, a ver qué me faltó por ahí, ¿no? Pues nada más y nada menos que Marco Hautz, el mexicano en Utah.
¿El qué pasó?
El de Utah de México. ¿Cómo es que la vuelta con Marco? Eso nadie sabe.
Hola.
¿Qué más bien?
Hola, bien, manejando.
Que tembló la tierra, ¿no? Hubo temblor.
Sí, tembló.
Y tienes un y lo detectaste con un Raspberry Pi. ¿Tienes un qué? ¿Un Earthquake Finder?
Sí,
seismograph. Vea pues. All right. Y nos falta el amigo de Idaho que vive en Finlandia. Our dear friend Joel Crane. ¿Qué dice? How is it going, Joel? I know, sorry, man. I know you said your Spanish is very limited, but hey, these guys also speaking English very good.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Hey, not a problem. And so we don't hold you here for too long listening to us yippity yapping in español. We'll take the opportunity. For those of you who don't know Joel has been in the industry for a while, huh? What's your story? I mean, if you haven't listened to the podcast, he has a good couple sessions. How many times have you been with Mr. Parsons on the podcast? Twice?
I feel like 3. Maybe there's 3 recordings now. I think only 2 are live, though. I think.
All right. Yeah. So he's done a lot for the community, and before I extended too much longer, these charts we have created, wireless LAN professionals, who hasn't used them, right? Everybody's used these charts. At one point, I use it in every class for reference, for when you're troubleshooting an issue. 2.4, yes, no secret, there's a lot of stuff in there. There's 5 gig. We even added the Uni4. Well, it was there even before it was approved, and then we got it approved. But not very many people seem to care about it, huh, Joe? They're like 3 more channels. Jerry. Llegó Jerry. Hola, Jerry.
Hola,
Jerry. How's it going, man?
It's going fantastic.
Thanks for coming. So 2 big geniuses here behind many projects in the industry. Many things to thank him for. Sorry, Jerry. Joel beat you to it, man. We're giving attention to Joel first.
He deserves it.
But hey, these guys used to work together at Ekahau back in the day when Ekahau was cool and functional. It was Jerry, Joel, and Yuzi, right? The 3 J's. JJJ.
Yeah, the triple J threat.
Yeah, and then they kind of split, like many split out and jumped ship from Ekahau. Jerry told us a couple of weeks ago from Ekahau he went to Aruba. and then went to Hamina. Joe, what's your story after ECA? Where did you go?
Let's see.
You
So
go home?
I taught some ECSEs for a little tiny bit,
Uh-huh.
and some CWNE or some CWNAs, and then I ended up at Juniper Mist for a year, and then back to where I started, back to MetaGeek, and I was a product owner there
Oh,
for 2 years, 3 years, I don't remember. And then
uh-huh.
UC convinced me to join over at Hamina, and then he convinced me to move to Finland, and here I am. So
And
uh,
not just you, with your wife and your kids and your dog. Do you have a dog or anything?
yeah, we no dog, but yeah, three kids. We left our goldfish behind. We had a
Mm-hmm.
fish when we left that in the United States. But my wife works at Hamina now, so it's like a family
Oh,
thing.
okay.
So
Yeah.
Family business.
yeah,
Great. Yeah, family business. Great thing. So
Yeah.
that's great. So lots of things happening. Very interesting. I mean, we should have like another session just for just chilling. I mean, we're gonna have a webinar next week with Hamina the following week. It's gonna be cool. I don't think it's been announced, right? It might.
I don't even know what's going on with that. There is a webinar, isn't there? I kind of remember
We're
hearing like,
doing a webinar. I don't know what we're going to be talking about. Just going to be us talking about cool stuff.
yeah.
But the reason why I invited these two gentlemen here is they recently were with Mr. Keith Parsons on the Heavy Wireless podcast. If you haven't signed up for that one, do so. I don't even know where do you go to sign up for it. I do mine in Spotify,
Or Apple Podcasts or
Apple
any app,
Podcast, and
anything.
I know I'm the most difficult to. Okay, so here's the where do I go to the list of all the podcasts? Heavy Wireless. I don't know if you're good with finding that stuff. I usually struggle a little bit trying to find this. I struggle with technology overall. Struggle with Wi-Fi. Struggle with everything.
Me too.
I think it's on
The list of
packetpushers.net for day. Packetpushers.net.
Oh, packetpushers.net.
Yeah.
Somebody finds it, just post the link on the chat. We'll put it on the show notes. But then on the phone, I find it very easily. Like I would listen. So anyway, listen to those podcasts. So the first one, let's start with Joe. We're talking about these charts that we've used, that we've played with them, that we have even one for 6 gigahertz down here somewhere, that they come in really handy, especially now with 6 gigahertz, that we have all of the channels and all of the different combinations of, if it's a PSC or if it's not. So we have to rely on these charts. They're cool, but they're static. Joe, looks like through some of your struggles trying to figure out something, you decide like, oh, I couldn't find something for, what was it? Remind me, was it Halo? No.
It was kind of for 802.11ah.
Okay.
Halo. Not exactly, but sort of. A little
Sort
bit.
of, right?
Yeah.
So if you go, and I posted that link on the invitation for this meeting, it takes you right here, which is that chart, but more dynamic. So Joe, why don't I just, instead of trying to figure out how to use this thing, accordion, look at that. So tell us more about it and how we can use it to make our life easier.
Yeah, it's kind of for fun. I didn't really intend it to be useful, but I think that people are finding ways to make it be useful. What I found is that while Keith's charts are amazing and I reference them all the time, they're not dynamic enough.
Do you want to share your screen and
Sure.
have it on screen? Because probably just stop sharing mine. And you go ahead and share yours and talk about it, because I know you'll be able to surf through it, teach us how to use it, and navigate through it as you talk. Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I put a link in the chat. It's just at spectrum.potatofy.com.
Okay.
And it's designed to work both on a desktop and also an iPad or an iPhone. And you can even make a shortcut on your iPhone, and it kind of feels almost like a native iPhone app. And I'm sure it works on Android as well. So this is a dynamic spectrum chart. So it's kind of like what you see with a Wi-Fi scanner, like Wi-Fi Explorer Pro or Insider or one of those tools, where you get that view where you've got channels, you've got spectrum represented, you have these sort of very basic spectral masks. But the key is that you can change it by zooming in and out. So here you see me zooming in on the 2.4 gigahertz band. I'm just using my scroll wheel to zoom in, and then you can click and drag to move it to the left and the right. And you can also change what you want to view by pulling out this little hamburger menu up here. So for example, right now I've got 20 megahertz Wi-Fi and also Bluetooth visible. So we could turn Bluetooth off. So now we're just looking at 20 and 22 megahertz Wi-Fi. And then we could say, let's take that. We've got the Japanese channel 14 right now. Let's take that out. So we could just uncheck Japan. Now we're looking at 1, 6, and 11. What if we want to look at the overlapping channels? You can check that and see where the overlapping channels are. Or we could say, let's get rid of the overlapping channels and look at classic Bluetooth and also Zigbee. Where does Zigbee line up, in the whole thing? And so you can basically go through and like dynamically change and tune this.
So explain Bluetooth and classic Bluetooth or BLE.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is I didn't even realize that there was a difference here until I started developing this tool. Because basically what I've done with this is, let me get Zoom out of the way and I'll just show you. If we go to, let me see if I can show you on my GitHub to kind of give you an example of what's going on under the hood here. When, oh, that's my blog. Let me go back to Spectrum and then we go to, it's all just one HTML file. So it's funny. It's actually very simple. So in the HTML file, there is basically these definitions like this defines all the different bands that are available in the tool. This defines all the cellular bands. And I did the same thing with Bluetooth where I just went and looked to see, where are the Zigbee channels? Where are the Bluetooth channels? And then the tool programmatically drew it for me. And it was like a light bulb turned on. And I could suddenly realize that these things were laid out in ways that I didn't realize. And so if we look at classic Bluetooth, you can see each individual channel where Bluetooth is always hopping around, and there's a whole bunch of them. In fact, I think there's
79, right? 80?
Yeah, I think 78, 79. Yeah, 79 because it starts at 0.
At 0, okay.
Yep. And so then if we go turn it on and we look at Bluetooth low energy, they're actually a lot wider. I think these are 2 megahertz wide. The lowest one is channel 37, and then they go all the way up here to channel 39. So I don't know why 37 is down there. I think it's for discoverability or something like that. But I had no idea that these two different schemes existed for Bluetooth until I, basically formatted all the channels, popped them into the tool, and visualized it for the first time and went, whoa, that's what it actually looks like. So it was really informative for me while I was building it.
Nice.
And the same is true for Zigbee as well. If you go out there and you Google like Zigbee channel chart, you'll probably come across this. You'll find this graphic repeated over and over and over again. So I actually made this graphic 2014 probably, back when I was at MetaGeek. It's wrong. It's dead wrong. It's completely incorrect. The channels are way too wide. There's actually a bunch of space in between them. And of course, I didn't realize that until I programmed them all in here and I had it draw them for me for the first time.
And then you had one of those oh shit moments as like, I did this wrong since the beginning.
Yep, I've been doing this wrong since the beginning. Now, so far, I've only been showing you what's going on in the 2.4 gigahertz band, but there's actually other bands you can look at. So for example, we could come all the way down here to the 900 megahertz band. So here is, let's turn Zigbee off. So here is 802.11ah or HALow. And really annoyingly, this drives me crazy. Check out what happens when I turn on the Japanese channels. They're offset by half a megahertz, by 500 kilohertz. So they don't line up in Japan. And I think that's just gross. Like, who decided to do that? But here it is. And if we turn on the wider channels, like maybe like 2 megahertz, 4 megahertz, 8 megahertz, there's the 116 that we have. And then what's also fun is to look and see where is LoRa down here. So there's 125 kilohertz LoRa channels, and there's the 500 kilohertz LoRa channels. And then one last thing that I'll show you guys just for fun here is that I also added the LTE and the 5G cellular bands. So these, I just show them as band labels. I haven't got them moved down into like being actual signatures yet, but I think it's really fun to see where all the different cellular bands are, and there's just so many of them. It's really shocking just how much cellular is, even on either side of the 2.4 gigahertz band. So anyway, that's my tool.
Now, is there 6 gig here as well?
Oh yeah, we got 6 gigahertz, so we can go. There's CBRS right there, and band N48. So cruise on past that. And here is 5 and 6 gigahertz. We can do a little shortcut to get to 6 gigahertz right here. And then we could say, let's turn on let's just turn on all the channels. Why not? So we'll turn on everything, and I'll turn the cellular stuff off. And there's all of our channels. I was really surprised at how the 320 megahertz wide channels are laid out. That was really surprising to me when I plugged these in for the first time to view them in the tool. And then maybe one last thing for fun. If you zoom into a 20 megahertz wide channel, you get really close, I'll show you where the subcarriers are. So you can see the subcarriers in there as well.
Wow.
So that's it. That's the tool. Oh, and at any time, if you want to make a graphic out of it, if you need to grab basically grab a screenshot of this, you can position it how you want, and then you can click this little download button, and it'll make a little image for you. So here is.
No way.
Yeah. So you can just.
Can we use that one without asking for your permission to do it?
Yeah. Yep. It's just out there for you to use, and then you can crop it and use it however you want. I'm just happy that people are excited about the tool and using it. So please feel free to use it.
Thank you very much. This is one of those great contributions that we can use for documentation, for presentations, for helping our colleagues, for training our junior engineers in wherever you work. So this is great. Stuff like this you don't find easily. And especially when it comes to the Wi-Fi stuff, you find charts. And yeah, we have used the ones we have used for so long that having something like this and so wide that we can go to not only 2, 4, 5, and 6, but also like below 1 gig and looking at LoRa and looking at HaLow and looking at all that stuff. HaLow, by the way, is kind of like gaining a lot of traction now. I noticed the WiFiNow conference this week. There's like a whole area for HaLow. They had like a big conference also for HaLow. And it kind of reminds me of Passpoint. That we're talking about Passpoint right now with the excitement of this cool thing that is not even new. This has been around for over 10 years, and now we're just like getting excited about it. Like HaLow. HaLow's been around for a while, hasn't it?
Finally happening. I'm pretty excited about it too. I wish I had a use case for it right now. I don't. But hopefully I'll have an excuse because I want to mess with it at some point in the future. What
I want to do is the next WLPC we're going to have in Spain, I think we're going to have a deep dive. Actually, this is going to be a conference that probably they're not going to be presentations. The audience spoke and we listened and they said like, we don't want any presentation. We just want training, deep dives. So we're going to have like a deep dive in AI that Manuel's probably going to help us with it. We're going to have a deep dive like in packet captures and Wireshark. David's probably going to help us with that one. Then David's going to be like, wait, what? Like, yeah, David is like the expert when it comes to Wireshark and all that stuff. We're going to have one in Wi-Fi HaLow. We can get the devices and train people on how to use it. That's an alternative. There might be a use case that once you know the technology, once we have the clients, because we have talked about Wi-Fi HaLow, but we haven't done anything because there are no APs. And even if you get your hands on an AP, there are no clients. Like, which client are you going to connect to your AP? So we're going to, now that I met with some people at WiFiNow, I'm going to be trying to get some gear that we can use during the conference and just have a deep dive on Wi-Fi HaLow and start pushing it. And once you give it out there to these guys, they're going to find use cases for it, and that's how things start developing.
Love it.
All right. Anybody here? Any questions for nuestro amigo Joel? I don't know. I haven't checked the chat. Never checked the chat. Where's the stuff? Okay, just what we've posted. Okay, well, Joel, thank you very much, amigo. You don't have to stay. You don't have to leave either. We're going to continue in English now because our friend here, Jerry Oja, doesn't speak very much more Spanish than you do, Joel. Well, he does know a few more words, actually.
Probably more than me.
No, probably not. Probably about the same, unfortunately. Yeah.
So, hey, Joel, before we move on, something that I just laugh here by myself. You know, when you're listening to podcasts and then something come to your mind, and then you're by yourself in your man cave or in your office, and you just laughing by yourself. When you say like, yeah, this is a side project, because you both work for Hamina, but doesn't have the Hamina brand anywhere. You don't see, a Hamina logo anywhere. You don't see like, oh, it's you, right? Doing this for that community. Yeah. So no things that, if you're a Nekahau guy, you cannot use this. This is only for Hamina guys. You're like giving it out to a community. Thank you very much. That's the spirit. But then you mentioned something that made me laugh. So like, yeah, I do this at night. And I know in Finland, there are some days that there's no night, right? There's like sunlight, like so on those days, when do you work?
Yeah, that's a good. I did it over the winter when the sun comes up at like 9:30 and doesn't set, and sets at like 3 p.m. So there's plenty of night in the winter.
Okay.
There's just no.
And in those times of the year it makes sense, but the opposite is like, you're probably not gonna have very much night to work on those things.
Yeah, in the summer, the sun doesn't go down. It's not dark until like 1 a.m. And then at 4 a.m. it's like getting light again. And by 5, the sun's basically up.
Man.
So I don't know if I'll work on it very much over the summer, but there are a bunch of things that I do want to add. So
yeah.
Example,
so what else? I mean, this opens up the whole spectrum of things. And in the podcast, you mentioned that Mr. Parsons mentioned that FCC chart that is like multicolor, but it's like useless because you just see a whole bunch of little dots in there.
Yep.
So I mean, this opens up.
The
whole
getting the cellular stuff in there as like proper, wherever I can figure out the channelization, getting the cellular stuff in there as proper channels is kind of in the forefront. It's at the top of what I want to do right now. For some reason, Mark always comes to mind when I think about the cellular stuff, but also DECT. I'm thinking about DECT a little bit, so I might put the DECT stuff in there pretty soon. And I mean, you say that it's separate from Hamina. True, like I did do it at nights and things like that, but at the same time, it is very closely connected to Hamina, and that at work we think about all these different radio technologies, and we're thinking about private cellular and all that stuff, and then I come home and it gives me more ideas. And so the two kind of like feed.
Absolutely. And I totally understand that. And now that's a good segue for Jerry, because Jerry worked on a very interesting project as well, that both of these projects could perfectly be a closed door project for you guys to benefit Hamina only and improve the tool and make things work better and have your customers work better and understand better the tool. But no, you guys just create it, put all your time and effort into it. Yes, it helps you, but you're putting it out there for the community. So thank you very much. I don't know if you guys appreciate and understand how big of a deal this is. I'm excited about it because we're always trying to figure out, visualize, understand, explain this thing better. And this is a way to do it dynamically and then look how it looks with just Wi-Fi, all pretty, 3 channels, and then you start putting things on top of it, and now you start getting a better understanding of it. So Jerry's project, I think we briefly talked about it when we were in Milwaukee, doing the roaming thing. We were actually testing a device, and I flew over there specifically to do a testing on that phone just to see when a phone roams from one AP to another AP based on signal, based on stuff. This one, I guess, now that I listen to your podcast like twice, I'm on my 3rd round, because every time you listen to it, you learn something new. I realized that the test we did was simpler because it was just one band, 5 gig only, and we were just using a phone that is going to be used by a hospital network, and they want to know when it roams, because documentation they give you is very limited. And even if they give you stuff, we learned that, Jerry, that it said right there that information is going to roam, that the phone is going to roam at certain thresholds. We set those thresholds and started testing. And the interesting thing is that the phone didn't roam when we told it to roam. It roamed whenever the hell it wanted. Like, for instance, we told it like at next 65, roam. And then it was always next 72, next 71. And depending on the channel, even though we were telling like roam at next 65, it was like next 57 and boom, it jumped out of a DFS channel. It's like it was all over the place. So, Jerry, tell us about your story with the roaming stuff.
Yeah, I mean, mine does have a shameless plug into the Hamina connection. I mean, that's what did start off this kind of roaming testing, is because within Hamina, and you can kind of see that in my slide title there, we have this roaming man, and we needed to create more clients in there to represent real world clients. So that's what kind of initiated this, because yeah, a lot of vendors, like Fernay was saying, don't document this stuff, or at least don't publicize this documentation of what are those roaming kind of triggers and thresholds and affinities or band preferences, or yeah, there's the one side as, okay, when is the device going to roam? But then the other piece of that equation is, where is that device going to roam to? So yeah, there's the one side of trying to determine, okay, what is that kind of threshold of when that client is going to roam? And some clients do give you some insights into that, or give you some control over that, or some configuration options. But what I wanted to mostly focus on with my initial kind of testing was, okay, if everything's kind of vanilla, left default, and just out of the box state for these different types of clients, what are they going to do?
So before you move out of this slide, man, who has time to draw the couches with the armrests and tables and the ping pong table with the net? Holy smokes!
That's what Joel does during the daytime. So during the nighttime, he's creating awesome, useful tools for us to use. But during the day, he's drawing lots of detail, right, Joel?
Yeah, that must be it.
That's really cool, man.
Actually, I think that was Dan. I think Dan went through and did all of that. And
yeah, now you had Shetel, playing with it and drawing pillows on top of the blankets, on top of the mattresses, on top of the beds. Like, holy smokes.
He made pepperonis on a pizza yesterday.
Pepperoni. I don't see the porcelain tableware.
Oh yeah, but that's coming on version 2.
Oh, great. Great. I was worried about it. Please be sure that it's Chinese.
The night lamp, it must be a really dark
porcelain
lamp.
Make sure it goes in there.
Grandma tableware.
All right. So Jerry, initially, of course, you were kind of like, how do we test it? Because even though clients, even if they document it, because that's one of the things we learned. I mean, that phone we were testing had like a piece of software actually dedicated to testing the roaming, but that it was useless.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, there's different methods, obviously, you could use to test it. This is what I'd consider to be kind of the manual test method, where you're just, take a couple of APs, maybe just 2 APs, you configure them, space them apart, plenty of distance between them, and you're just going to physically move that client that you're looking to test back and forth, right? Probably by walking between the 2 APs until it finally roams over to the 1 AP, and then changing directions, go back to there. Not very easily repeatable if you want to test a bunch of different clients. Also kind of hard to capture the information that you need if you're going to be physically walking around trying to record all those kind of details. So yeah, what I came up with is this more automated method, which really, enabled me to test a lot of different devices much more easily and record the results. So in this automated testing, it programmatically increases and decreases the power of the AP, so everything stays physically static, right? Nothing's physically moving. The client is static and stationary in the middle. The only thing that's changing to induce those roaming events is lowering the power of one radio while increasing the power of the second radio. And that way the client would be forced to kind of hit that roaming threshold and move somewhere.
And this is brilliant, because to your prior slide where you're actually moving the device, which is how it happens in real life. I tried that here. We had a missed AP, and I put it in a playhouse in the back, inside the room, isolated, surrounded with stuff. And I'm here inside the man cave. I place another AP 30 meters that way. And even though with those devices being like 60 meters apart, I could not get this cross of the signals, one going so weak and the other one going so strong that I would roam. Sometimes I would not roam at all. So that's why I flew to Milwaukee because it's so difficult to do in a real environment with a real device moving back and forth. So this is brilliant. Thank you very much, because this is another idea you put out there for the community, and you did a great presentation in Phoenix also about it. So the data, right?
Yeah, and I guess I should mention, if anybody does want to try to set up a result like that, I did publish some of those the scripts that I use to do those kind of power level adjustments and the results and everything. So yeah, if you want to dig in deeper than what we'll cover today, if this is interesting to you, you can go to this GitHub, and these slides and results and all that kind of stuff are published on there. So feel free to check those out.
Okay, I'm typing this as you talk to put it on the chat. Here we go. It's there. Let's see if it works. There we go.
Perfect.
So Phil is asking if any testing keeping radio power the same but changing the SNR threshold. Probably too much to test.
Sorry, I didn't quite follow that. Say it again.
So any testing keeping radio power the same but changing the SNR threshold. Probably too much to test.
Changing the SNR.
I don't think you can adjust that one, right? That's usually like the phone we were testing, Phil, had an application where it showed, like, you know, start looking for a candidate at next 65. And then like roam. I mean, there were three variables we couldn't quite understand, because one said like first time roaming, and then the other one was like roaming low threshold or something like that. So there were three variables that we tried to move them around, but apparently it didn't. There were just a couple of variables, like when we moved everything to neg 90, when it started doing nothing at all, but it was just out in the air. So I don't think adjusting SNR is actually a thing, or is it? Phil, what am I missing?
No, we had and we use Extreme, as you know, and Extreme Copilot, which is the machine learning or reactive AI algorithm that Extreme looks across, you know, the entire landscape, which us humans have no time to do. And it was finding a lot of airtime, high airtime utilization, which, as you know, can make the channel go slow. And when the channel's slow, it's like the motorway's slow as well. And all I did was increase the signal to noise ratio by 5 dB as a threshold before a client could join.
And that made a difference?
It made about 80% of the poor client numbers went away. So we had an 80% improvement in poor client connectivity numbers.
So you're talking about on the infrastructure side, preventing a client from joining unless it has a certain SNR.
Yeah, and I know that, I believe that if a client's already connected, then it's, you know, even if it moves out of that SNR range, it'll probably still stay connected. But if it's choosing to another candidate access point to roam to, then my threshold is set a bit higher than the default. So it's forcing the AP to make a decision based on its SNR. And so I didn't have to move any of the APs. I was quite confident in where my AP placement is around Europe. But so I was pretty sure it wasn't the placement. But
Interesting. Yeah. And I guess you would depend now on the infrastructure you have. If Extreme allows you to do that, that's great. But I don't know if Aruba, for instance, has like a way to adjust the threshold for SNR. It's similar to a probe suppression, you know, that if I can hear somebody at certain power level, I will respond. If not, I will ignore. So kind of like in those lines, but I'm sure there's more engineering in there to take place.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach. No, I did not do any testing along those lines, but yeah, that could be interesting to explore. What I have seen doing some stuff like that in the past is because, that is kind of, you know, obviously we know the client is in the driver's seat, right, of making those kind of roaming decisions. So then you're trying to kind of influence that from the infrastructure side, which may have varying results. At least from my experience, it may have varying results depending on how the client handles that, because normally the client is obviously in the driver's seat, and then you're trying to influence the client from the infrastructure side, which depending on the client, it may behave differently in you know, with those different configurations.
Of course. I mean, we've all been in the game long enough. We have to know try and influence the client through whatever way we can, you know.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting one though, that we are working on a roaming wars 2.0 now that I've sparked some interest apparently with some other engineers. So yeah, there's been all sorts of ideas like that of different tests. So yeah, I love hearing that kind of stuff that we can kind of add to the list of, you know, what other things can we test with this type of setup. I'll hit on just a couple of things here, if that's okay, Fernay. I don't know how much time.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. As far as the results go, this was like the first one as kind of like the baseline of just if we took all things equal of all three bands being enabled, the SSID being configured on all three bands. You know, we're talking 2 APs now, so that's a total of 6 radios, right? Obviously, the client's going to connect to one of those radios, and then we're going to induce that roaming event, and we're going to see where does the client go. And in this test, it was all things equal in the sense that there was really no incentive for the client to go anywhere else other than, you know, a different frequency, right? Does it prefer 2.45 or 6 gigahertz? Does it not care? You know, is it purely based off of RSSI? You know, those kind of things. So I tried to baseline everything of like, make sure RSSIs were fairly leveled. That was very difficult to do, as I'm sure you're aware, with different clients hearing better on different bands and frequencies than others. So it's not a perfect science here, but I tried to get at least some normalization here of the client hearing 2.45 and 6 gigahertz all equally the same. No boost in channel widths or anything like that to entice the client to move to one band or the other. And you can see some clients, they still love 6 gigahertz regardless of that factor, and they still would get sucked to 6 gigahertz 100% of those roams, where other clients, actually the majority of the clients, would go other places. Even, you know, some of these like the mobile devices for whatever reason seem to favor 2.4. My suspicion on that one is probably more to do with RSSI than anything, where they were just hearing that 2.4 signal better than 5 and 6. So that's why they were getting sucked over to 2.4, even though technically they should prefer, you know, or I would have kind of expected that they would prefer 6 gigahertz.
Quick question, Jerry. By any chance, do you take into consideration the firmware that each device is running, or the chipset?
I did document that. Yeah, if you pull up the slides, I've got all that documented here, which as of the time of testing, which is now several months ago, I updated everything to the latest that was available, other than, you know, like some beta drivers or something, but everything was like the publicly available drivers and operating systems and all that kind of stuff at that time. And that's a good point too, is like, I try to do everything vanilla on the client side, in the sense that I didn't tweak any knobs or optimize anything. It's all like the out of box state. I also did the same for the, like I was using Aruba APs and trying to use just vanilla configuration of, I didn't tweak any knobs of like SSID configurations. So this is what you would normally get if you just configure an SSID and you can enable anything that's not enabled by default. So including things like 11K was one of the things that I wanted to test. So let's actually jump to that one, because I think that one's also really interesting. Is I wanted to see, does 802.11K, the neighbor reports, actually have an impact on roaming? Because really that is one of the things that we often look at of, if we see clients making poor roaming decisions or being very sticky, does something like 802.11K influence that? This is just some documentation that Apple publishes that is actually really, I think, well documented. I haven't seen any other vendors, and they actually explicitly, you know, spell out what the Apple devices do with 11K. This is specifically for iOS devices, so that doesn't necessarily translate over to, like, you know, Mac OS devices, but specifically for mobile devices, they do heavily utilize 802.11K. And from the results, this one doesn't really kind of speak too much volume here, but if we look at this next one, this shows the comparison of the same exact test. One ran without 11K enabled, the second one with 11K enabled, and then I put them kind of each device kind of the no 11K and then with 11K above and below. So the main one that stood out to me was, I guess the two things that stood out to me in this test was, one, the devices performed very consistently test to test, which means that 11K didn't influence the majority of the devices positively or negatively, which I think is probably the most important factor, is that at least all of these modern Wi-Fi 6E, Wi-Fi 7 devices, you know, whether you have 802.11k enabled or not, it's not going to break anything, right? I didn't see any negative side effects by having 11k enabled. I did see, however, with the iPhone, a very positive improvement of one, it became much less sticky, it roamed more frequently, and it preferred 6 gigahertz. It roamed to 6 gigahertz much more frequently during those tests. So definitely, you could tell iPhones or iOS devices do certainly you know, benefit from having 11k enabled from at least this one particular test.
So, and you mentioned that all these tests were done with PSK, so you didn't have no R and no fast transitioning or anything. I think it would be really interesting to do these. Of course, it's more time, more testing, more. Maybe we should have another gathering one of these days and spend more time building this up, because if we set up, let's say, a free radio server and have this set up with an SSID that has that 1X and radios, then see what's going to happen if it's any different.
Yep. I'll show one more slide here, and then I'll leave it to you guys to check out the presentation. There's a presentation on YouTube from WLPC, if you haven't seen that one, that goes over this in much greater detail. But the other one that was really interesting to me of the results was, do tri-band capable devices prefer wider channels? So if you remember, the original baseline test was just all things equal, everything 20 megahertz. What happens if we just take the 6 gigahertz radio and we crank that up to 80 megahertz wide? Well, we keep all the other the other two options, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, keep those at 20 megahertz, and you can see it did drastically change the results. So pretty much every client does have this band affinity or channel affinity, or channel width affinity, in the sense that if you do have a wider channel and the other options are a narrower channel, it does prefer significantly to go to that channel or that band. Now the B200 and the MacBook Pro were very consistent regardless. They didn't care what I configured any of these settings as. They would nearly 100% of the time in every test go to 6 gigahertz. So you'll notice that through the results as well. So there's just some clients that don't care what the configuration is. Other than, I do think, and I've seen some, I didn't do this test because I saw Wes did this test previously, where if you do set, let's say, like 5 gigahertz to 40 megahertz wide, and you set the 6 gigahertz to 20 megahertz wide, they will start to prefer 5 gigahertz. So there is specifically like a channel width preference for pretty much every 6 gigahertz capable client.
And something interesting, of course, all of this was done, as you could see, and as Jerry explained, with the device sitting stationary in one location. We did the test with the device unplugged from power and plugged into power, because that may also change the way devices make decisions. But the other one is that after this was done, I think in Phoenix, wasn't it, one of the Apple guys came and said like, oh, and if you're walking with the device, the decision is going to be differently because of the gyroscope or the movement of the phone. Yes. Is going to influence the decision matrix. So like, oh, another thing to test.
Yep. Whether it's moving or stationary, apparently that influences the device's decision of when to roam and what to roam. And yeah, that's going to be another test we're going to try to figure out how to test for in Roaming Wars 2.0. So stay tuned on that one.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one. I think Luna had a question, didn't you, Lunita?
I think I have, but it was answered with the Jerry's talking. So thank you.
Good to see you, Luna.
Oh, hey man, how are you?
You're doing well.
Great. Say hello, Joel, everybody. Good afternoon.
Hey, Luna.
Sweet. Wow. Well, guys, it's been great having you both in here, because definitely great things happening. And this is the clear example of doing things for the community, spreading knowledge, because, you know, the amount of hours I'm sure you've spent, because I spent lots of hours, testing something similar, and I got nowhere. I had to go ask Jerry, like, Jerry, please, let's do this, because I couldn't figure out. Francisco, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Jerry, quick question. What was the ratio between TX power between your 5 gigahertz cell versus 6, 2 or 3 dBm on this testing?
You're saying the difference between 5 and 6?
Yes.
So 5 and 6 were actually, I believe, matched up, if I remember correctly, because I've went through multiple iterations of this, and I'm trying to remember back with that testing. I believe 5 and 6 were matched up pretty much exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest challenge was 2.4. I learned quickly I'm going to have to, I had to clamp 2.4 to always be at least 6 dBm less than 5 and 6 gigahertz. But yes, if you look at the script of the power level adjustments, I believe 5 and 6 gigahertz were even. Now, to that point, that also proved to be another challenge in all this, of all the many challenges of setting up this kind of testing. So 6 gigahertz became what I would call the ceiling, right, of the power level adjustments, because of PSD and those limitations on 6 gigahertz, where we have to keep that 6 gigahertz signal, especially when it comes to like the beacons. It can only be, 17 dBm was what I could go up to, 17 dBm. And this is Aruba, but this is all PSD. So roughly that's going to be your ceiling for this type of, what you can do in 6 gigahertz is 17 dBm was the max I could go up to. And then the floor, which thankfully with the Aruba APs, you actually do have a really low floor. You can actually go all the way down, which I didn't even know I could do this until I started doing this testing. Aruba APs would let me go all the way down to a -3 dBm on the transmit power. So I could go from -3 dBm all the way up to 17, which was perfect because that was a 20 dB swing that I could do in this testing, which was perfect when you think about it, because I could start at the clients, being at like, let's say -65, 60, 65, and I could bring the signal all the way down to about -80, -85, depending on the client. So it gave me that kind of perfect range to do that roaming testing.
Yeah, that is helpful. And pretty much my question came from, because I'm doing some testing with 6E standard power, where my ratio between 5 and 6 is between 2 and 3 dBm of difference between 5 and 6, where I don't have 2.4, I have 5 and 20 megahertz, but I have 6 gigahertz with 40 megahertz because it's outside, right? So I want to have more channel utilization. So as you mentioned, right, the channel width will probably beat other metrics, but RSSI, I believe, is kind of it's still a metric here to consider, because I'm seeing kind of mixed behaviors, right, where the client get associated into 6E, 6 gigahertz, but after, quite some time, the client moves into 5 gigahertz and stays there, despite that it has 20 megahertz channel width and very similar cell size. So I have traces, data that I need to go through, but I just wanted to get your thoughts, and I'll be more than happy to share what I see, what I learned from these 3 different devices that I tested out. But yeah, I want to get your thoughts, and thank you so much.
And I think that's an interesting thing that I took away from some of this testing too, is often what we test when we want to see, is the client 6 gigahertz capable, or will it connect on 6, is almost always every one of these clients, when I would first turn on Wi-Fi, it would find 6 gigahertz and would connect onto 6 gigahertz. But what was really interesting to me was, will the client actually stay on 6 gigahertz? Will it actually roam from 6 to 6? Will it bounce around, and will it drop maybe on the same AP from 6 down to like 2.4 before then it roams over to like the other AP on 6 gigahertz? So yeah, every client kind of, or at least some clients, I should say, did do some very, kind of interesting behavior where they might initially connect on 6, but then once you start seeing them roaming through the network, they don't always stay on 6 gigahertz.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and so even I guess one of the big things we learned from this, well, from the test that Jerry did and my struggles testing the phone I tried, is that even with documentation, even with a piece of software that kind of showed and gave us the opportunity to set those thresholds, the real life for the device was totally different. Like, it was so unexpected. We spent almost 3 days working on this. And I think the first day and a half, Jerry, we spent trying to learn exactly what the software was telling us, and realized that none of what it was telling us was true. So we ended up realizing that we had to manually do this process, well, with the automation that Jerry put in place, so that we could learn the behavior of the device better. So yeah, the piece of software that the customer was using to rely on, like, oh, I roam when I hit this threshold, or I roam when I hit this, was not true. And I guess did that in multiple places, huh? So even with documentation, because one thing is what the device says, what the documentation says, the other thing is what we in the field come across, that devices actually do other things, not documented. So that's the reality. And because we had this discussion, like all of this we're doing, and wouldn't it be nice if the vendors would actually give us the documentation on how they tune, they configure their green diamond to make decisions. But now we realize that even if they provided that documentation, that's not going to tell us the truth of that in the field. So just to summarize, WiFiNow this week in California is the typical WiFiNow. I showed you around a little bit the prior session. We had a live session there. We did have a big presence of Wi-Fi HaLow stuff. Looks like, and I was telling Mr. Parsons, these guys, that this sounds like Aspen. It's been out there forever, and only now we're like all excited about it. There were no chips. There were no chips, yeah. And the thing with that is that now they're like pushing it more, and there are like more devices. They're putting it in cameras. And Jorge Antonio, that's ahí, amigo. I know you guys in. Oh, Alex, you're there. You guys have done a lot of stuff with LoRaWAN, like big scale, right? Like citywide deployments and things like that. Have you met like a possibility in Wi-Fi HaLow to provide for some of those use cases? I don't know if Jose's there. Alex?
Hi, Ferney. Can you repeat the question, please?
So you have done a lot of stuff with LoRaWAN, right? And LoRa, just big deployments citywide in Europe. Have you come across the possibility of Wi-Fi HaLow providing solutions to some of those needs?
The technology is quite interesting, but there's still not there is the ecosystem. There's no devices there. So until the devices, it's like usually the egg and chicken problem. There's no devices because there's no market. There's no market because there's still no devices. So I don't know, unless the Chinese or they start to develop the devices to be used, I don't see how it can get into a sector that has other technologies like NB-IoT or cellular connectivity or LoRaWAN in that part that can fulfill the same functionality that Wi-Fi HaLow. I'm still waiting because it's been like 3 or 4 years since it was presented, but I haven't still seen a lot of devices in the market.
Okay, and now that is my screen on your screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like this company is from Japan, and they apparently are making a lot of chips to put on a lot of other stuff. There were like 4 or 5 companies just dedicated to making chipsets, and well, Morse Micro is actually the main one, and all of these companies are integrating the Morse Micro chip into their solutions. So they have modems, they have little devices that you can plug into cameras and stuff. So I guess one of the things that I see as not very enticing for AP vendors is that their claim to fame in the technology side is that, hey, with 2 APs, you can do a whole warehouse and have people walking around with devices and working fine with 2 APs. But if you are going to sell 100 APs to a warehouse for Wi-Fi or 2 for Wi-Fi HaLow, yeah, I'd rather say 100 APs than just 2, right? David's like, not going to happen. So, but there must be a lot of use cases. We'll see more. One of the things I'm going to try to do for WLPC Valencia, I don't know if Mr. Parsons is aware of it, but the community has spoken. They don't want presentation. They just want training. So we're going to have a whole bunch of shorter deep dives. AI for engineering and Wireshark and Sedos and Hamina and Wi-Fi HaLow and have shorter ones. So that's what WLPC Valencia is going to be like in September. The 12th to the 16th is where we're going to be there. Other than that, WLPC Prague, the call for presentations is out. So if you want to submit a proposal for presenting or doing a deep dive or a boot camp, now's the time. Hey, Phil, if you want to present or teach something, you're more than welcome to.
I just want to ask a quick question on Valencia. I'm really, really bad at Wireshark for a person who's been in the industry as long as I have. It's pretty embarrassing. You said there may be a deep dive in Wireshark. Will that be for advanced users or would it be for?
It's probably going to be advanced. One of David's tonterías. He always comes like, something. And then he comes up with something that blows our minds away. And yeah, don't be shy, man, because Phil was the first presenter that we had in Bogota. Yeah, and he came from New Zealand. You were in New Zealand back then, huh? First Spanish-speaking WLPC we had, and it was Phil who did the first presentation. You also presented in Spain. So yeah, you're pretty good, and thank you for your contributions. So WiFiNow, again, it's a totally different conference. A lot of devices for HaLow and companies doing testing. I kind of walked around and just took pictures and talked to some people, saw other people. They introduced like Hall of Fame, Dorothy for their contributions, and also what's his name? Greg Ennis.
Yeah, wrote the book.
Yeah, the one that wrote the book. So it was a good gathering of people. Drew Lenz showed up there, and we had a good time. You start seeing more people that go to both places. There are two different conferences. This is the conference where they talk about Wi-Fi, and WLPC is the conference for people that do Wi-Fi. So it's kind of an interesting mix. So I think that's getting to the top of the hour now. I guess that is it for today. What did I miss? We talked about, let's see, heavy wireless. Here's the mastermind behind it, Mr. Parsons. Thank you for bringing all these geniuses together. And every time, some of these presentations I have to listen to twice or so, because, you go through and then you go back and say, oh, wait, did he say, 40 wider channels is better or not better? And then we had Joel talking about the spectrum chart. How do you call this site? I mean, the spectrum chart or the spectrum site, or?
I don't know what to call it. I've been calling it a dynamic spectrum chart. I can't come up with anything. I feel like just slapping potato in front of it would be lazy. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Potato chart. Yeah, I don't know. I'll maybe someday I'll come up with a name, but for now it's just a dynamic spectrum chart.
Really cool, huh?
I love it.
Yeah. It's amazing. And yeah, we were talking about that. We've used these charts for years. We still use them. I mean, it's not that these ones are outdated. We use them all the time. I use them in every class. I use them in every presentation that we have to talk about channels. But then having that dynamic chart that you can compress and expand and just move quickly from one to the other, and then move these static other channels from other technologies on top of the actual channels that we're using for Wi-Fi, that helps a lot in documentation, in training. It helps in many, many different ways, and it makes our life easier. And the fact that you can download this into so whatever you have in the screen, when you hit that download button, it just downloads this as a screenshot, huh?
Yep.
Perfect.
And I still use Keith's charts all the time because they have way more data on them, right? And if I was a better developer, I would get this to a point where it had more data than Keith's. And maybe someday I'll get there. Give me like a decade. Maybe I'll get there.
Well, this provides just what we need to sometimes show somebody about it. So thank you very much for your contributions. And Jerry, the roaming wars, that stuff, there's not going to be a version 2. There's probably going to be 10 more versions, but there's so much to do.
I think we'll get it all figured out by version 2.0. We'll have it mastered. We'll know how every device roams and behaves. No,
and that would be the end of it. And I think
along with Wi-Fi 10.
Wi-Fi 10, yeah. Yeah, just yeah, now it start getting more complicated. And again, the things to highlight is that you both work for Hamina and you didn't keep this closed door project behind, curtains and it's just for us, Hamina or Hamina customers. No, you just put it out there. If you use HALow, you use Tesos, if you use whatever, when you do channel plannings or troubleshooting, this is a great tool, and all the knowledge that Jerry, all the hours you put into making those discoveries, help us, understand the devices in the environment better. So thank you very much.
You done Tesos with Francois' new client database?
No, I have not. I'm gonna have to. Yeah. Okay. Looks like there's gonna be a new Tesos with Francois and the client list. Is it updated?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, we'll be talking about that then in the future. What did I miss? Any other questions, comments before we wrap it up? Luis, David, Fel, todo bien? Listo. Well, with this, I guess we get to the end. Oh, at the top of the hour of session 258 of Tesos in Wi-Fi. Can you imagine? 258 sessions already. So, ya saben, se les quiere gratis. We always have this saying at the end, we love you for free. We'll see you next week. And then, gracias a todos por venir. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Mr. Parsons. And I guess we'll see you next week. Have a nice weekend.
Gracias.
Adiós.
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 Oh, there was one more thing that we didn't have time to talk about.
One last thing.
The test accessory next week. Next week we will start with this, and I'll do more testing because I can use that as a speed test for other Netherlight devices, and also for HALow, use it as a device for doing throughput testing, I think. So I'll find out and I'll let you know next week. Have a good one. Adiós.
Adiós.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.